Good morning, everybody. My name is Ken Roberts with WorldCity. I'll wait just a second to let everybody find their seat and get comfortable. Exchange greetings with all their fellow participants this morning. A little pandemic humor, I guess, to start. But we will get started in just 1 second. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. I want to start by thanking, of course, welcome to Miami MIA Trade Trends, our 2020 and 2021 trade update. I have to start by thanking our sponsor, Miami International Airport, for making this event possible. We also have some wonderful support from our supporting sponsors, Florida Custom Broker and Forwarders Association, World Trade Center Miami, and of course, the Coral Gables Chamber of Commerce. I have two terrific speakers presenters will be joining me today. John Price, who's the Managing Director of America's Market Intelligence, and Jimmy Nares, who's the Section Chief of Aviation Marketing for MIA, Miami-Dade Aviation Department. And I'll get to them shortly. For those of you who don't know me, and a number of you do, but those of you who don't know me, in addition to starting WorldCity in 1996, quarter century ago, I write 5 columns a month for Forbes.com on international trade. I just completed my second 3-year term on the Federal Reserve Trade and Transportation Advisory Board. I termed out. In addition, we produce trade numbers publications around the country, like the one we'll talk about a little bit today for MIA, but we've done them for Port Miami, for Port Everglades. We've done them in Texas, California, Pennsylvania, New York, Massachusetts, Georgia, Washington, around the country. You get the idea. We also do Trade Matters videos that we post on our YouTube channel. We have a Trade Talk newsletter that goes out once a month for South Florida as well as for other parts of the country. And our website, ustradenumbers.com, where we update some 10 million data points every month. And we'll be using that a little bit later on when I go through some of the trade data. If you have, let me show you the MIA trade numbers publication we did last year, and we'll be doing one shortly this year as well. We redesigned them last year and gave them a whole new look. Oh, we're going to run through the sponsors here. I'm sorry, I already ran through those sort of backwards. So again, our sponsor, MIA, Miami International Airport, thank you very much for that. And our supporting sponsors, World Trade Center Miami, FCBF, and Coral Gables Chamber of Commerce. Now let's take a look at those publications. Here's Miami National Trade Numbers, the publication we did last year. As you can see, if you've seen Miami Trade Numbers, we've been started publishing trade numbers publications in 2001. We revamped them completely last year and made them much more visual using sort of all sorts of the nice data visualization techniques, and they have a really nice sleek look. You can go to our website, ustradenumbers.com, and download any of those for free. The 2020 versions are the ones that are up now. We're hard at work on the 2021. I'm sorry, the 2020 versions are up there now. We're hard at work on the 2021 versions now, including one for MIA. If you have any questions during the presentation today, you're free to put them into the question queue that you'll see on your screen, whether you're on a computer or phone. You'll see that there, and we'll try to get to them as we see them. If not, we'll get to them when we can, but you can ask them at any point. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jimmy Nares. And Jimmy, as I said, is the Section Chief of Aviation Marketing at Miami National Airport. He's responsible for forming and implementing cargo development marketing programs for the airport in that capacity. He specializes in areas including pharmaceuticals, perishables, and manufactured products. He serves as MIA's representative as a strategic member of the Pharma Aero Association, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Fascinating area. And prior to joining the airport in 2015, Mr. Nares worked in Miami-Dade County's Office of Economic Development and International Trade for a lucky 13 years. He holds a master's degree in business administration from Florida International University. I'm going to ask Jimmy to join us and get Jimmy on the screen here with me. And then we'll run through a few questions that I have for Jimmy about the year in trade 2020, pharma, e-commerce, perishables, things like that. So I'd like to welcome Jimmy to the stage. We got Jimmy yet here?
I don't have him up yet.
Hello, Ken.
Yeah,
Hello.
we can hear you. There you are.
Okay, great. Hey, guys. It's a pleasure to join you. Thank you for inviting us at MIA to be a part of this, of course. And yes, despite the pandemic, we have had a record year for cargo at MIA on a number of fronts. We broke our record for overall annual cargo volume with 2.3 million tons. This was up 2.53% from 2019. We also had our highest number of cargo-only flights during the year, which was up by about 15% from 2019.
And that's a particularly interesting statistic, but we'll hopefully get to that a little bit more. But go ahead, Jim.
Yes, thanks, Ken. And we also closed out the year with our busiest 3-month period ever, averaging 210,000 tons per month during the months of October, November, and December.
Great. So let's talk then about, let's start with perishables. Perishables are obviously a critical piece of what happens at MIA on the import side. How did 2020 go for perishable trade, Jimmy?
Very well, Ken. Perishables cargo is historically one of our strong suits at MIA. We handle about 62% of all U.S. perishable air imports by volume coming through our airport. This was again the case in 2020. We had actually growth in perishables by volume, about almost 4%, 3.97%, which even outpaced our growth in overall cargo for the year. So we were very strong overall in perishables, but just a couple of areas I wanted to highlight. Seafood imports increased from 187 million kilograms in 2019 to 223 million kilograms. It's an 18.82% jump. And Chile was a huge part of this growth due to its imports of salmon, which increased from their country by 31.7% coming into MIA. We also had a very strong year in flowers. And just to give you an example, how strong we still are in flowers, the 2021 Valentine's Day flower rush, which just finished, was essentially the same as it was in 2020 before the pandemic. We processed about 1.1 billion flower stems earlier this year.
So I hope that everybody who's joined us today either was on the receiving end of those flowers or was a sender of those flowers, somehow experienced as part of that show. What's amazing about the whole perishable thing, and I'm sort of excluding flowers just for the moment, talking about the food, is how quickly the supply chain, not only at MIA, but throughout the country, was able to shift from, supplying a lot of perishables to restaurants to having to shift to supplying that to the distribution network for our grocery stores. And because we're all cooking at home so much more, really, really amazing that it went as well as it did. So let's shift gears now quickly, and let's talk about an area of perishable trade that we don't often think of as perishable, but they're highly perishable, and that's pharmaceuticals. What has MIA's role been, for those who don't know the history of it, in the export-import industry involving perishables? And then quickly, how did 2020 go in that space as well?
Yep, thanks, Ken. Well, we continue to grow as an important pharma hub airport. We began this initiative about 5 years ago when we developed an airport community of 5 IATA CEIV pharma certified companies. By gaining these CEIV certifications, these companies basically became experts at properly handling and storing temperature-sensitive pharma products. And in 2020, we had a strong year once again. The volume of pharma imports and exports at MIA increased by 5.9% to 16.34 million kilograms of pharma products valued at $3.73 billion. We also are a co-founder of an international organization called Pharma.Aero, and we continue to work closely with our other CIV pharma airport communities around the world to advance the air pharma transport industry and to work on strengthening pharma trade lanes around the world so that we can grow our pharma trade at MIA. Given that our airport is a leading cargo gateway to and from Latin America and the Caribbean, and because of our CIV Pharma certified airport community, MIA is also playing a key role as a regional hub for COVID-19 vaccine distribution.
That's terrific. And I don't know this, but I know MIA was first in this country and one of the first two in the whole world to be part of this program. Are there other U.S. airports that have subsequently joined? You know?
Yes. Well, MIA was the first airport in the U.S. to gain status as an airport hub, as recognized by IATA. We are the second in the world, but there are many more now all around the world that realize the benefits of having of gaining the expertise of the logistics community for properly handling pharma products. So the community has grown quite a bit. And just to give you an example, pharma.aero, which we co-founded, has over 35 members now, where a couple of years ago we were just a handful. So we're growing considerably.
Fantastic. For a number of years, we did an annual publication called Perishables Trade Numbers that some of you have seen, and year in, year out, the value of pharmaceuticals on both the export and import sides, primarily the category that's just medicines in pill form, was overwhelmingly the number one valued import and export. They're not only are they life-saving, but they're incredibly valuable, incredibly important, incredibly critical. And as we've discovered, at least in the initial phase of the Pfizer logistics supply chain, some real challenges to moving those vaccines around the country because of the cold temperature requirements. So one thing we've all probably experienced to some degree during the last 10 to 12 months is an increased use of online shopping and e-commerce. So what I know from the data, because I've been playing around with it for 2 decades, is it's really hard to figure out exactly what e-commerce is in there and what is not. The data when it was set up was not meant to include that sort of notion. So you have some indication of how you think e-commerce is going through the airport. By the way, I should add that the airport turned out to be really remarkably sort of prescient in making this initiative in pharma, and then within the last couple of years also making an initiative into e-commerce. I was one of a large group of international trade people in and around MIA who sort of participated in some discussions on how MIA could prepare for e-commerce, and this was 2 and 3 years ago, so the timing was really good. So what kind of numbers can you look at that give you at least a sense of what might be happening in e-commerce, Jimmy?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Yeah, typically e-commerce does not fit in a nice and neat category. It usually falls under low-value shipments, but all indications are that e-commerce is growing robustly at MIA. In addition to having a record cargo year for volume at the airport, we also saw strong performance from our carriers, such as Atlas, which flies for Amazon. They saw a 9.8% increase in their cargo volumes. Similarly, UPS had 6.5% increase in volumes. DHL had 38% growth in their cargo volumes in 2020. All 3 of these carriers regularly carry large quantities of e-commerce, and we saw significant growth from them. Brazil is another strong indicator for us. Brazil is one of our largest trading partners. We saw 8.2% growth by volume with Brazil in 2020. And we saw a jump in the category that I mentioned, low-value shipments with Brazil. So we see a lot more e-commerce going with Brazil. Also, we believe we're starting to see the benefits of a program that we started a couple of years ago called the Compra Fora. It's the MIA Brazil Pre-Clearance Program. And this program provides expedited shipping from anywhere in the world to be pre-cleared in Miami and arrive in Brazil as the domestic cargo shipments, thereby significantly reducing the amount of time e-commerce shipments arrive in Brazil. So we're starting to see the benefits of that program.
Great.
And with Brazil.
Yeah, and we'll talk about e-commerce more when we, in my discussion with John Price after I run through some of the trade statistics. So Jimmy, thanks for those comments. And what I'll do now is I'll run and jump into some of the trade data for you guys. And as part of that discussion, we will also have some interesting poll questions for you. So Jimmy, thank you very much. And if time permits on the back end, we will bring you back on screen and see if there's any questions for anybody. So let me give you a quick overview of MIA's trade year. So the statistics we're going to look at now are not going to be on the volume level, we're going to be on the value level. That's how we traditionally measure the trade data that we're looking at. And so if you look at the year 2020, on the surface, it was not a particularly good year. And if all other things been equal, you say a year when the value of overall trade fell 9%, that's not a terrific year, but that's what actually happened. Trade fell to 53.4 billion, 9.1%, but US trade fell 9%. So MIA was sort of right in line with what happened around the country. So that's not so bad. Exports declined slightly more, 12.81%, and imports themselves fell 3.45%. One thing I'll note there is that it could have been much worse. If you look at MIA trade by quarter, 3 of the 4 quarters, that trade decline was less than that 9%. It was that second quarter, which we all remember now, that April, May, June period where the US economy largely came to a standstill. In that quarter, MIA's trade fell, by the value of that trade, fell just an enormous amount. It fell 24.57%. So the other quarters, it was just a fraction of that. So let's go on and take a closer look then at the various pieces of MIA's trade. We'll start with a look at the countries. And I've got a poll question that I'm going to put on the screen, and these are all anonymous, so you need not worry about that. And I'm going to launch that poll now. And here's the first question for you. 5 of MIA's top 10 trade partners registered gains in 2020, 5 of 10, okay? Which country did not register an increase in two-way trade? Was it Colombia? Was it Chile? Was it China? Or was it Argentina? So 5 of the top 10 registered a gain, but 1 of the following 4 did not register a gain in 2020. And we'll give you just another 10 or 15 seconds to answer that question. And I'll show you the results. Okay, I think those of you who want to answer have already popped in with your answers, so I'm going to end that poll and share the results with you. 55% of you said Argentina. Another 30% said China. Just 3% said Chile, because there be no Chile, just sort of cruises along no matter what's going on, it seems. Colombia was 12%. Argentina was actually the fastest growing top 10 trade partner. China is the correct answer. Trade with China dropped 10%. And it was largely not on the export side, because there's very few exports to China, particularly from MIA, but it was on the import side. So that correct answer then is China. So let me now take you to our website for just a second here. And we'll run through some quick data for you. So this is ustradenumbers.com. So I'll explain a little bit about it very quickly, just to give you a sense of those who've not been here. It is a subscription-based website. There's a dashboard that's free to everybody every month that you can see for all these pages, but then certain amounts of it are behind a firewall. So this part up here you can usually see for free, and I'll show you that on some of the other pages. This particular page has a lot of free and available data. This is the page that shows all US airports, seaports, and border crossings. And what I wanted to show you here is this is a ranking in 2020 of all US airports, seaports, and border crossings. And here's MIA, and it's in the top 20. MIA is always right about the top 20. But what to me is interesting as anything about MIA, if you look at those 19 airports, seaports, and border crossings ahead of it, every single one of them has at least one of the big three, Canada, Mexico, or China, which account for almost 45% of all US trade. Every one of those has one of those 3 in their top 3, except for MIA. So MIA, without doing nearly as much trade with China, Mexico, or Canada, still ranks in the top 20. It's the only one in the top 20 that can make that claim. Now, if you notice, China is number 4 here, okay? Whoops, there you go, redrawing, there you go. China is number 4, but this is a quick snapshot of my international, this is 2019. Let me bump it up to 2020 so you can see a little bit of change. Italy fell way out, and there you see Argentina. As I mentioned, it was the fastest growing top 10 trade partner. In part, that is because Argentina's trade, as many of you know, goes up and down. It had been on a downward cycle for a while, but the last couple of years has been moving up. So Brazil counts for about 1 out of every $5 of import-export trade, and Colombia 10%, and Chile's number 3. So a real quick look then at the top exports. These are the top exports leaving. This is 2020. As you can see here, I have it on the 2020 figure here. So civilian aircraft and parts, a really tough year in that category, not just at MIA, of course, but all over the world. And as many of you know, Miami International Airport is one of the 3 or so biggest MRO sites in the world for maintenance, repair, and overhaul. Cell phones, number 2, computers. Now, here's what's worth looking at. If we jump back to 2019, you see computers accounted for 6.6%, jumped up in 2020 to 8.1%. Now, why would you ask, is that the case? Well, because people are working at home and they realize, even in Latin America, and they realize they need a better computer at home if they're going to have to be working at home. So there were some shifts in that trade. Let's look now at imports. There you see our imports in 2019. We'll jump back real quickly. Returned exports without change is sort of an oddball category. I won't spend a lot of time talking about it, but a lot of times things are exported out for one reason or another, and they're brought back without any change made to it. There's another category where there's with change, and that's usually for things that need to be repaired and so forth. But this could be things going to a trade show and back, or it could be things that are bought and returned for whatever reason. On the rest of the page, as those of you know who are a subscriber to at least the lower level of our website here, you can see all the ports and where MIA compares, and you can then compare it to other airports. You can see how it'll jump up pretty quickly there, obviously. You can see the value, you can see the percent export and import. MIA, by the way, always has a trade surplus. Historically, it's had one of the largest in the country. And then you can see what we all saw. This is April and May. You can see it right there very graphically where things just shut down. And you can see then it came back up to sort of normal level by the end of the year. And that's sort of what Jimmy was talking about when he talked about the volume. So and that's the 1.7% decrease. And there's an auto-generated story on the website every month. So let's take a look at Colombia, because Jimmy talks about those flowers, right? So this is 2019, fresh cut flowers. I think we need to go to our export section first, don't we, Tatiana? I jumped ahead to our export section. So let me, no, I didn't. No, this is the country section, excuse me. So here's our fresh cut flowers. So this was 2019, 43% of the value is flowers, 30% gold. We jump ahead to 2020, look what happens. Gold. So why does gold go up in value? As many of you know, gold goes up in value when markets, financial markets, get skittish about the economy. And certainly early in first, second quarter of 2020, there was reason to be quite skittish about where the economy was headed. So there was a great need for gold suddenly. So that's what happened there to Colombia. So let's now look at fish fillets. This is Chile. This is imports from Chile. In 2019, fish fillets accounted for 67% of the value of all imports from Chile. Went down slightly in 2020, but if we switch to tonnage, for those of you who are paying close attention, Jimmy was talking about the value, the volume of imports. You can see the tonnage at 101 there, and if you switch to 2020, it jumps to 129, and I think Jimmy used the figure of about a 30% gain in the tonnage of imports from Chile in terms of salmon, and that's what this data here will show you. Let's now jump to the export section of our presentation, and I'm going to throw up another poll for you. Let's go to the second question for you, and I might even have given you a little clue there. Here's the second question for you. 4 of MIA's top 10 exports grew in value in 2020. Which one of the exports listed below is one of those 4? Which one of the 4 below grew in value in 2020? From the earlier results, it looks like either you guys are smart or you were listening one, or you're maybe seeing our Trade Talk newsletter. I've written some about this over time. We'll give you just another second or two to answer. Is it cell phones and related equipment? And by the way, within that category, it is a lot of cell phones, but it's also a lot of the equipment that's used to make cellular networks work. And Miami is a key player in that for South America. Then there's computers, there's gold, which I talked about a little bit, as well as computers, and then medical instruments. So there you go. Let's see what we got here. We're going to share those results. And I will say this time you guys got it right. I may have tipped my hand when I mentioned the increase in the percentage of computers exported from MIA, but the correct answer is computers. Cell phones actually decreased, as did gold on the export side, and as did medical instruments. So let's go. I'm going to go back to share my I'm going to go back to look at some of that data on our website real quickly. And so let's look at the computer category. So this particular part of our website shows when computers leave the United States, from which airport, seaport, or border crossing do they leave. And you can see, this is in 2019 I'm looking at right now here. Detroit was number one with about 12%, followed by MIA, and then LAX, and then a border crossing in Mexico, Santa Teresa, which is right across the border from where Dell manufactures. But let's switch to 2020. And look what happened. MIA inched up very, very close to the Ambassador Bridge. By the way, all of Detroit's go to Canada, needless to say. So MIA had a strong year in computers and actually gained some ground in that area. Let's look at another export. Let's look at medicines. Jimmy talked about medicines and individual dosages. And by the way, pharma, that category of imports, medicines and individual dosages, increased 51% as an export from MIA last year, increased 51%. Computers, by the way, were about 7.5%. So let's look at 2019, where those exports went to. Brazil, no surprise there. Argentina, I mentioned to you, was a fast growing trade partner. Uruguay, Colombia, Mexico. But let's jump ahead to 2020, and here you might see a surprise. Look at the number 2 market all of a sudden. China, and part of this is because, if you remember what Jimmy was talking about, the freighter increase, one of the areas where there's a fair number of freighter traffic is between MIA and increasingly China. The airport has been making an effort for a number of years to open some of those trade lanes to get more trade from Asia and specifically China. And that has sort of paid off over the years and making Miami an important hub for trade that needs to get into Latin America and to some extent into the Florida market. Previously, a lot of that cargo was going to come either through LAX or DFW, but if it was LAX, it was going to come by truck oftentimes to Miami before heading to Latin America. So I'm going to jump now to the import section of our presentation, and we'll launch another poll for you. And let me stop sharing that one. Whoops. And let's get the next one up there for you. Here's the import. Okay, launch poll. Five of MIA's top 10 imports grew in value in 2020. Which of the following did not grow in 2020? Was it gold? Was it cell phones? Was it fresh cut flowers? Or was it fish fillets? 5 of the top 10 grew. So this is why it was an interesting year for MIA, because 4 of the top 10 exports grew, 5 of the top 10 imports grew. There was a fair amount of growth within that decline in trade. So as we're seeing in the overall economy, you're seeing a lot of, you never know when you stop a friend and ask them, well, how's business? Because some are going to say it's great and some are going to say it's been tough. It's just very, very hard to predict. So again, 5 of MIA's top 10 imports grew in 2020, which did not grow among those 4 listed there. So I'm going to end the poll now. And again, these are anonymous polls. This is not a test. We're not sharing the results with your teacher, or your parents, or your spouse, or your children. So the audience is correct by a narrow margin. What's really interesting is that gold grew, big growth in gold imports, but not in exports, which is a whole nother story of what's going on there, because usually gold is strong on both, because most of the gold that historically has entered MIA from Colombia or Mexico or wherever it might be from year to year, Peru, often goes to Switzerland, sometimes to Dubai, sometimes to Hong Kong. This year, gold exports were down, even while imports were up sharply. They were up, I want to say 100, 130%, more or less. Cell phones declined, and that's really curious. but they did. And this is not just at MIA, this is a nationwide trend. Fresh cut flowers did increase, as did fish fillets. So let's look at let me get a couple of pages up on our screen for you. We'll look at a couple of things quickly on imports now. So here's fish fillets. MIA leads the nation in imports of fish fillets. And this is, you know, in MIA's case, it's largely from one place and it's one type of fish. Some of these others are going to be bringing in a wide variety, but MIA is sort of the salmon king, and Chile is where those come from. This was 2019 results. And if we jump to 2020, not surprisingly, then if you've been listening, MIA's percentage jumps to 23%. So pretty significant gains there in the fish fillet category. We'll look at one more thing here quickly, and this is where those fish fillets come from. And as you see, they come from Chile. This is the 2020 figure, 86%. And if we go to tonnage, it's about the same, but as you see, it's just totally dominated by Chile, as you've learned to hear from us. So at this point, what I'd like to do is go back and introduce John Price, who is our next speaker. John is I never shared the results from you last time. Here they are. There's the results. I'm sorry, I didn't share those results. There you go. You can see that you got it right, cell phones. And we'll stop the sharing. So excuse me for that. John Price is the Managing Director of America's Market Intelligence, long known to WorldCity and long known to many of you in the audience. He's done consulting work with more than 100 firms in the region across 20 different industries, and I don't think I could even name 20 different industries. Former president of Info Americas, market intelligence firm he sold to Kroll a number of years back. He's published more than 100 articles on doing business in Latin America and maintains a column in Latin trade. He co-authored and co-edited Can Latin America Compete, a book in 2017. And he's a board member of Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos, a Latin American orphanage network. Without further ado, I will introduce John and let John tell us a little bit about what he sees going on in the region and whether we should be looking at what we should be looking at, countries, industries, or where you see it going. Welcome, John, to the discussion this morning.
Ken, thanks so much. And hello, everyone. Great to be back with you guys. You know, Ken, I think you mentioned it in your anecdote. You said you talk to some people, they'll tell you things are going well. To others, they'll say it's not so good. Across the region, every country in Latin America declined in 2020, and every country is projected to grow in 2021. So looking for differences by country is not really where the story lies, but rather by industry. And that's not just Latin America, that's worldwide. In the US, they call it a K recovery, right? With some people who are tied to growth industries and growth companies doing rather well with increases in salaries, and those tied to industries that were really hurt by lockdown remaining in a struggling state. In Latin America, the industries that are doing well are fewer, I would say, than an economy like the United States. If you look at, we did a sort of look at the top 50 companies worldwide who increased their market cap under the pandemic. And all but one of them were outside of Latin America. Only Mercado Libre had gained value in its market cap to be take a place on that list. Whereas if you look at the top, if you sort of go to someone like America Economia and you look at the top 100 Latin American companies by market cap and you look at what industries they lie in, it's things like traditional retail, energy, automotive. These are all sectors that have generally suffered under the pandemic. And so even in the large, most competitive companies in Latin America, it's been a rough year. Now, what really is the most, I think, lasting and worrisome trend coming out of the pandemic is what it's done to the distribution of income. Again, this is a worldwide phenomena. We know in the United States that it has worsened the income distribution. In Latin America, that trend is even worse because 60 to 70% of Latin Americans work informally. That is to say, they're paid essentially in cash. They receive no social benefits from the government. no unemployment insurance, and most importantly, when under lockdown, they are unable to shift their work online. And so whether you're running a small mechanic shop or whether you're running a street level market, whether you work in a gymnasium, these are all probably informal jobs that cannot be shifted online. So while overall incomes dropped, say 15, 20% in Latin America, for some of these people in the informal sector, their incomes dropped for some of the quarters in last year, 80%, 100%. And so the poverty rate, which has been slowly declining, it's some measured at $2 a day income, it had declined, and Latin America had done an admirable job over the last 30 years at combating poverty. Well, we just lost 12 to 15 years of hard work in combating poverty.
Just repeat that one. That's a big number, right?
So almost half of the advancement made over the last 30 years was lost in 1 year in terms of the war on poverty in Latin America.
Wow.
Now, not only is that a personal tragedy for a lot of people, but we know, I've been studying the region for 27 years, we know that when distributions of income worsen, and it's not about half worsening and half, we're talking 80% worsening and the other 20% perhaps neutral or getting better. We know that politically people are angry with the incumbents and generally embrace a more populist political message. You combine that with the fact that there's generally been a doubtful sentiment around the virtues of democracy growing in Latin America, many Latin American countries in recent years. And what the longer term political ramifications of this is that we may see even more populism politically. And we've got a series of elections coming up this year. We just had the first round in Ecuador where the populist is out in front. Peru is a very fragmented set, and it's really difficult to predict what will happen there. We have important elections in Chile, including a referendum around how they'll reconstruct their constitution. We have an election next year in Colombia where the leading candidate right now is a left-wing populist. That would be a real disruption to a country that has generally enjoyed centrist politics for the last century. So this is worrying people, not just now, but in the near future, what Latin America politics will be, how committed they will remain to free trade, how committed they will remain to the rule of law, to the protection of foreign investment. This is a genuine concern for all of us.
And overall, it can complicate import-export trade, particularly exports. Miami serves as the reason I mentioned earlier in the discussion that MIA traditionally has one of the nation's largest trade surpluses among roughly 450, 460 airports, seaports, and border crossings. And that's because Miami is the sort of the shopping cart for Latin America, and we flood Latin America with computers and printers and all sorts of things. And this can complicate that. Is that right?
Certainly. I mean, you talked about how the markets back in March and particularly April, May, reacted negatively as money from all over the world fled to lower risk assets. Well, in emerging markets, that triggers generally devaluations, and we saw that most dramatically in Brazil. And Brazil has been the currency that's been slowest to recover, although that's not necessarily a negative thing. It's because they have more national savings and they're able to keep their interest rates low, which ultimately will be good for Brazil. But what it means is that the purchasing power across the Latin American currencies that trade, lost 20% of Latin America's GDP value in dollars last year disappeared. That's the largest one-year downturn in purchasing power in Latin America since World War II. And so that helps explain why the value of imports dropped, even if the volumes remained, pretty robust, because people basically opted for the cheaper model of whatever they were buying. Right. And at the same time, we're seeing a nice rebound in exports coming out of Latin America, as, first of all, most exports in Latin America tend to be extractive industries or large-scale manufacturing. These are led by large companies who were able to very quickly get back working even while the rest of the economy was under lockdown. So trade generally has done better than, say, the service sector within Latin America.
So I have one last question for you, John. If anybody has a question, be sure to add those either for John or for Jimmy or for me in the Q&A queue there. But if we can try to put a positive spin or a silver lining to any of this, it's that e-commerce, I think when we talked, you said there was a significant jump in e-commerce in the region over the last 6 to 9 months. And the implications for that are good because why?
Well, the e-commerce story, as Jimmy was pointing out, is always more complicated than first appears, and you have to sort of drill down on the numbers. E-commerce traditionally includes what we would call, domestic e-commerce, where it doesn't cross a border, cross-border e-commerce, and those are both of physical goods, right? Then another category would be digital goods and digital services, like an Uber or a Netflix purchase, which can be cross-border, but doesn't impact the logistics industry, for instance.
Right.
And then the third, which is the most mature of all these categories, is travel, buying air tickets, car rentals, hotel reservations. So obviously that travel portion, which traditionally was 30 to 40% in Latin America, plummeted. The cross-border grew somewhat, particularly in countries that rely on cross-border supply chain for e-commerce. But the biggest jump was domestic physical e-commerce. So people started buying groceries online and essentials that traditionally they would buy in a store. And the other, of course, was digital goods and services, particularly digital goods. So Netflix had a great year in Latin America. I mean, Latin America is Netflix's #1 market to begin with. So
number one by what proportion?
In terms of viewership per customer.
Capita. Okay.
Mexico's #1 in the world. Of the top 10, 5 are from Latin America. They're Netflix addicts down in Latin America. So, digital content. And digital content, this is where it gets interesting, because obviously for the purposes of this program, we're looking at the movement of physical goods and the handling of physical goods, and how does that impact Miami? So again, what's important about the pandemic is that it forced a lot of people into e-commerce for the first time. Some say as many as 50 million customers in Latin America tried it for the first time. These are people who aren't necessarily poor, but operated in a cash economy. So they earn
a total population of what is it?
650 million.
650. So 8% is a pretty
but
big.
out of an adult population of probably 450 million.
Okay.
So big jump. And this is important because, again, these people were not poor. They just operated in a cash economy. So you never really knew their purchasing powers. But they went from a cash economy where they earn in cash and they buy their goods in cash to suddenly being locked down in their homes. And the lockdowns in Latin America and some of the countries were far, far, far more severe than anything we saw in Europe, anything we saw in the United States. I mean, in Chile, you couldn't, if you were to leave your home, you had to get special permission. You had to be tracked on your phone. In Peru, you weren't allowed out of your home. Colombia, you weren't allowed out of your home for like 2 months at a time. It was really, really tough. So they had to buy online. That means a lot of people came into the digital economy. They received government stipends through a prepaid digital card. So suddenly they're in the digital economy. And as we've all experienced when we first try e-commerce, we do so with some hesitation. But once it works, we begin to discern between those purchases that are more convenient to go and buy and those that we buy online. And so the thinking is that with 50 to 60 million new customers, in the future, even when the pandemic subsides, they will continue to make some purchases online, particularly higher value stuff that's hard to find in the neighborhood store. Now that becomes important for Miami, because Miami, through traditional trade, would only handle sort of containers and ship entire containers. Not a lot is manufactured in Miami, but it handles a lot of Latin America traffic on behalf of manufacturers around the world. And so our footprint on the sale of, say, $1,000 of goods in Latin America was minuscule. But if you add in e-commerce and what Jimmy was talking about the accord made with the Brazilian postal system, where it goes into their domestic distribution hub and through the Correios de Brazil, and now Miami takes on a much bigger footprint of that same $1,000 of trade. And so cross-border e-commerce is enormously important for places like Miami that can be a fulfillment center. And Shopify, Amazon, and eBay all have e-commerce fulfillment centers in South Florida. So I'm not sure how big they are, but the fact that they believe in Miami's competitiveness as a fulfillment center really bodes well, I think.
And that's where it ties into, again, MIA's strategy years ago to really, for a number of years, to continue to push Asian airlines, particularly Chinese airlines, to land at MIA.
Absolutely.
So it just cuts out sort of the West Coast or whatever middleman. So it's really good. Any questions for John before we cut out our discussion, or Jimmy? Any questions for anybody? If not, we're going to say that we closed pretty much on time today, and I think that's it. John, that was a great presentation. As always, you brought some great insights to the discussion. I appreciate your thoughts on that, and give us all something to think about as we start moving forward. Once again, I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Miami International Airport, for their support today. And throughout the year, we'll do 3 more of these coming up in the next few months. And of course, thank our supporting sponsors, who are the ones that helped promote this event and bring you to the table: World Trade Center Miami, Florida Custom Broker and Forwarders Association, and the Coral Gables Chamber of Commerce. If you want to reach out to us at any point, there's any number of ways you can do that. Again, our website, ustradenumbers.com, is ready for you to check it out. By the way, because the MIA page is sponsored by the airport, that page is open to the public. So you can see a lot of the data that I talked about for MIA today without any charge. But you can follow us on social channels at Trade Numbers or at US Trade Numbers, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. You can certainly give us a call at 305-441-2244. And my email address, if you would like it, is kroberts@ustradenumbers.com or kroberts@worldcityweb.com. Without further ado, then, I would like to thank you for being here, and I hope you have a great rest of the day, and we hope to see you soon. And by the way, if you want to sign up for any one of our newsletters, Trade Talks newsletters, just drop us a line, and we'll be happy to get you set up on that. So thank you very much for being here today, and we hope to see you soon.